Hey everyone. So today we're talking about loss. For this one, my main resource is the Pride training. Again, that's Canadian content. I am not an expert and I don't claim to be one. I am just a prospective and upcoming adoptive mom who really wants to do the best job possible. And recognizes that our kiddos are coming from a different place and maybe a bit of a hard place. So for today, we're talking about loss because they will have all experienced their own bucket of loss. And for internationally adopted kids, that can be a lot of things. As parents of these adoptive children, it is very important for us to know how to help our children cope with their grief and with their losses. All children from adoption have experienced loss. They've experienced the loss of their birth families, their language, their culture, their countries, their food, their caregivers, and really every single thing that is familiar to them. And so even if we may have judgments about their circumstance or their living situation right now, that's all that they know, and that's what's familiar to them. And so change is hard. Change is hard. Young children still have very egocentric thinking, which means they believe that the whole world is about them. So they will also usually believe that they somehow caused this loss, that it's their fault, no matter what anyone else says. So it's important for us to continually remind them that that's not true. This is important to us as their parents because it means that our children may have guilt and self-blame around this, even if they don't vocalize that. And for us to just know that and to reassure them that that is not true, that life often is circumstance and it's not our fault. So in that part of our job is to be a loss manager for our children. The more that we can understand about their losses, when they happened, what age they were, what developmental stage they may have been in, that helps us know how deeply the loss may have impacted them and what we might be able to expect from it. But regardless, we're just meeting our children where they are. So even if we know very little of their past, which sometimes is the case with international adoption, we often have very little information. And so we're just going to learn as much as we can from our kids when they're in our care and really be intuitive to what they give us and go from there. But as much as we can know, it's our job to know and then to know how they're going to respond to their grief. So to break down some of the terminology, separation is the change that occurs when there's a breakup in relationship. So obviously if a couple gets separated, it's the same thing with any type of relationship. So that's a separation. Whereas a loss is the effect on a person when something important is withdrawn from their life. So not necessarily a relationship, but something important that you're losing. And grief is the process that helps a person work through the pain of separation and of loss. Therefore, grief is a very important emotion to allow in our kiddos and in ourselves. It's one of those feelings that you need to allow and to move through and not to bottle up. It's actually now scientifically proven that there are chemicals in our tears that help our bodies to process our grief. And so it's very important that we allow that process and really think of it as letting our kids get all their tears out. And that's good language to use. Like, have you gotten all your tears out? It's okay to get all your tears out. And actually, it's really, really good for us. All right, so then there's expected versus unexpected losses. So that's pretty straightforward. Expected losses are the types that occur within normal life development. They are shared by all humans and usually have support for them. A person may feel normal in their grief. There may be regrets, but not blame or shame. So if our parents pass away at a expected age, that would be an expected loss in life. Or if our pet passes away at an expected age. Unexpected losses are when you are unprepared to cope. So they may not be all equally shared by all humans. like the early loss of a parent. If your parent were to pass away when you were quite young, that would be unexpected, obviously. For adopted people, social and medical history, cultural identity, connection with family, and birth story are all losses. They can be very difficult and require support and understanding to avoid those feelings of shame and blame. We want to avoid those as much as possible. So as their parents, we also have to think of our own losses in coming to adoption. Not all of us came from a place of none of it simply, selecting to add another child to our world. Some of us have our own losses related to that decision. And so we may have lost the type of family we were expecting to have, history with our children around pregnancy and birth and early childhood. We may have to give up the idea of a fantasy child. We likely have to change our expectations on what our child will look like. If we were expecting to have a child by birth and that didn't end up happening and we've shifted to adoption, well then we might not get the comments of your child has your eyes, and that's okay, but it's something that we may need to process. There are all sorts of other losses like genetic continuity, not so important to some of us, but very important to some. We need to grieve that out. As well as control in building our family, because we really required others and a whole system in order to make this happen. And this is all simply part of our experience. We need to recognize it and grieve it so we can move forward in full health and happiness with our adoption and our future kids. So at the onset, you may have had something different in mind, and that's okay. And what does it look like now? And is there any feelings you have around that? Feel them. Grief is totally healthy. It's how we as humans process our separations and losses. And there are fairly reliable stages of grief that we all move through as we do this. Given that adopted kiddos don't often have the words to express their grief, either due to their age, their developmental stage, a special need, or just the fact that they're speaking a different language, they do express those through behaviors. It's important for us to know what this might look like in our kids. So when they're in a state of shock or denial, which is often the first stage of grief, they may have flat emotions. They may continually ask to go home or refuse to eat. They may have sleep problems and be more susceptible to illness or injury. Next is often the stage of bargaining, which is making a deal to make the situation go away. It might look like them trying to determine if they did something wrong that they can fix. They may have imaginary or self-conversations. They may act out to prove that no family can handle them or wants to handle them. Alternatively, they may try to be perfect, and that's a different coping mechanism that we have to be aware of. Another stage of grief is depression, and that's just anger turned inward. This may look like excessive fear, the lack of desire, or ability to do normal development activity, so just no desire to play or do things. They may be clingy and express a lack of feelings in response to happy or sad experiences. And they might have anxious behaviors or nightmares. Then there's anger, which is outward expression and acting out. It's the stage where they realize that a loss has occurred and it can't be undone. It's hard for children to express anger directly at their parents. So they might express it by throwing temper tantrums, destroying property, using abusive language, lying, stealing. In young kids, it's often flailing, acting out, having tantrums. And then there's the goal state of understanding, which is being able to express fully why we feel our specific emotions around loss. This is when our kiddos can start to express more hope for the future. This is the good stuff. Being successful in learning and managing their behaviors and feelings, they learn that it is okay to have all of their feelings. And they also learn that there are okay and not so okay ways to express them. So that's part of our role. Your child will start to feel comfortable in just being themselves, and you'll see that. All right, so before we close, how do we help our kids move through these stages of grief? Practical little solutions. So have a daily routine. Especially at pickup and if you're fostering in country, but once you're home, Do the same things the same way at the same time every day. Be patient. Talk. Reassure your child that you are there for them and that you love them over and over and over again. Over and over and over again. Give clear and simple answers to their questions. Give them hugs, but also respond to how your child reacts to physical contact. It might not be their love language, or they might be uncomfy with it at first. Still hug them. You're their parent, but be responsive to how they respond to you. Always respond to your child's cries. So if your kid's crying, go to them and comfort them. Respond to them, even if you think it's a fake cry, because what they're doing is they are seeing if you are going to respond. They're seeing if they can trust you. Again, you want to consistently show up, consistently meet their needs, consistently respond to them. And that goes in the evenings too. So in the nighttime, how will you do that? Do you have a plan? Are you planning to co-sleep? How will you respond to them 24 hours a day for a while? Some other tips: go outdoors. It's great for all humans. Allow them to use play to work through their emotions and things that have happened to them. Allow them to talk, even if you don't understand them due to their development or due to language barriers. Just let them talk and actively listen. Make eye contact, listen to them. Allow them space to express their feelings safely. So the safe part is more around anger. When they're lashing out, we want to make sure everyone is safe first. And then if you can allow it to burn itself out, that's great. And communicate as you're able. So at first, with language barriers, that may be through actions, through demonstrating, through learning ASL or something else, to just work through that until you have the language communication skills available to do that. And that's all about learning their thoughts and feelings. We want to learn all about them so that we can help them to navigate this world and to feel safe and sound and loved. And so it's also important to know and understand our own childhood losses, because grieving children can often trigger our own losses. And so making sure that we are comfortable with that. And so that's where the homework is for today, because it's difficult work. It's never completely finished. We'll be triggered throughout our lives. Our children will be triggered throughout their lives, and we will have our grief responses that we go to. So I'm recommending that you write down your own losses, your own loss experiences, and how you've processed that grief. How have you worked through that? Ensuring that you have grieved your own losses in a healthy way, it helps prepare you to help your child to do the same thing. They need your support. They need your modeling in order to work through this. I don't even recommend that you keep this paper. I recommend you write it down, and I've got a fire behind me. I am blessed to have a wood stove near me at all times, but I recommend that you write it down, that you process it, that you get it out, do whatever you need to do, and then burn the piece of paper. Get rid of it, bury it somewhere, and be done with those losses. Feel yourself feeling that. And then those are exercises that you can walk your kids through when they're a little bit older. So that's it for Loss for today. Thank you for joining me again, and we'll see you soon.